get help for yourself first, because the emotional roller
Interesting.
coaster ride that you're going to be, embarking on, nobody prepares you for that. The first thing they tell you, okay, your child needs these many therapies, these many times a week, and all you're looking at is, oh my God, you're mentally just doing the math on this, at how expensive this is. We should teach children, because we were not taught to do that. So if you're,
Yes,
let's be honest, our generation was not taught to ask for
it's
help.
true. And it's also not very culturally relevant as well, right?
Exactly. It's a stigma, right? To ask for help. So moving forward, that is something like, a chain I want to break. And I want to teach my children that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to need help.
Mhm. Welcome to Enara Talks. I'm your host, Sophia. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Farah Danish, a dedicated special education professional and advocate for children with autism. Farah's unique journey as a mother and her extensive experience have shaped her mission to transform inclusion and empowerment. Let's dive into her story and insights. With over 30 years of personal experience with autism and 8 years as a special educator, behaviour therapist, and brain gym movement facilitator, Farah is transforming autism support by focusing on the entire family, not just the child. Her Chaos to Calm Autism Mum Group cohort helps mothers regulate themselves, leading to stronger parent child connections and better sleep for everyone involved. As a certified Touch for Health practitioner, Farah integrates traditional therapies with holistic well-being. Her insights as both a sister and mother to individuals on the spectrum redefine autism parenting by fostering harmony within the entire family. So, Farah, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to Enara Talks. I want to start by asking you a question that's more about your experiences, both as a special education professional and a mother of a child on the spectrum. Why don't you start by talking about that?
First of all, thank you, Sophia, for having me here. And thank you, Inara, for organizing this. Very interesting question, and a very sensitive, very loaded question, because you really don't know where to start with that. Obviously, I started my, this whole journey into special needs with my son,
Mm-hmm.
who's on the spectrum. I'm, by the way, also a sister to an individual on the spectrum, but it didn't start then. Um, I had to work with my child, and the most sustainable way to do that was to become, a special educator, a behavior therapist, did all of that. And then I realized that I'm enjoying this, that if I can do this with my child, why not do it, at a center, at a school where I can learn more? Very different experience. Very grateful for that experience. Um, how it helped specifically is that because I was a parent of a special needs child, parents of my students connected with me in a very different way. So they would often confide in me and talk to me about things which really had not much to do with their child, but it played a role in supporting or not supporting their child. So I was able to help their children because I knew what was going on in their homes.
Mm-hmm.
So as a teacher, I was more, I was not just an educator or a teacher, I was more to them because I'm a special needs mom myself. And I could see my son in each one of the kids I worked with, obviously, right? And their parents knew that. For my own son, being a teacher, being an educator
Mm-hmm.
helped in the sense that I got to work with some really interesting specialists and professionals who had a very different take on what special education is supposed to be. There was a lot of unlearning that had to happen, which was actually very difficult.
Okay, like
It
what?
was very difficult because I came with a very ABA background, and then I had an RDI. For those who don't know, it's a relationship development interventionalist.
Okay.
So they work from the premise of working on relationships, developing relationships, and ABA is a lot about compliance.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so very different approach, like take the child's lead, and so it's not very as structured as
Mm-hmm.
ABA is. So I'm like, okay, I'm all about structure, and this specialist is all about take the child's lead. And in a classroom, how does that work?
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, a lot of unlearning, and it was amazing. I had another special education teacher who was like, no, I do things very differently, and she was successful at what she was doing. So I learned a lot of that, and I could use that for my child, and giving him a more holistic, a more well-rounded educational experience than the typical ones that most special needs kids get.
I just wanted to touch upon the fact that you said that you were a sister growing up to a sibling that was on the spectrum. How did that impact the way you parented your own child, and how that's even led to your experiences today?
I think that again was something. When I think about it now, I'm grateful that I went through that, because as difficult as it was, because this is, you have to remember, in the 90s, when there's still very little awareness about autism. We're living in a day and age of information, and there's so much information about
Right.
autism, but there's still, the awareness is still not quite there yet. And so in the 90s, nobody knew what autism was. Even the people who are living with autism didn't exactly know what
Yeah,
autism
it's
meant,
true.
and how to parent, how to be a sister to someone on the spectrum. But the experiences that I gained from that helped me in the sense that I've got 4 children. My oldest is on the spectrum. So it was
Right.
very, very important for me to inculcate the sense of respect that, okay, he has autism, he has some intellectual disabilities as well, but he still demands respect. He's still the eldest. He's still the older brother. You still
Yeah.
have to listen to him, and he still can tell you what to do and what not to do.
Hmm.
And we make sure that he understands that as well. And he does exert his, the fact that he's a brother. He'll tell his younger brother or sister if they're doing something which he knows is not right. He's got limited speech, but he knows he can tell them off. He knows he can come and complain to me about them. So, in that sense, in the sense of respect, because I feel we didn't give enough of that to our sibling because we just didn't know how to do
Right.
that. Yeah.
So it's interesting you talk about his sense of responsibility
Yeah.
as an eldest son exists, and that role doesn't change no matter what.
Yeah.
And he holds on to that. So it's great to hear that. How have you built your own connection with Suleiman, your son, um, through your experiences and your practices, actually, because you are a professional as well as a mother?
Once you start working with your child as a therapist, as a special educator, you forget that you're also a mother. And I went through that. I think all
Right.
mothers go through that, even though I have a brother who's on the spectrum.
Hmm.
But you forget that because you go into this fix it mode. I have to fix him. I have to reverse this, because you're led to believe that you can reverse this. You can help him, become independent and cope with life, but reversing and curing that, and that's a different, conversation, I guess. But when you get the diagnosis, the first thing you want to do is fix it, and everything just goes downhill. I'm very mindful when I use that word. Everything literally starts going downhill, because I'm a coach now, Sophia, and I have a lot of mothers who tell me that my children, my autistic child does not want to be with me. He runs out of the room the minute I enter the room. I'm like, why do you think that's so? And she says, no, I don't know. I'm trying to work with him. I'm trying to have tabletop activities. I'm like, he needs a mother. And you are constantly looking for learning opportunities.
Yeah.
You're not developing that motherly bond with him. So back to your question about my relationship with him, I think that kind of changed thanks to my husband bringing that to my attention, that, I know you're a special educator, I know you work at centers and all that, but he's our child and he needs a mother. And he demonstrated what that looks like, because I had even forgotten what that looks like.
Wow.
I didn't know what that meant. Easier said than done, right? So he would organize, and he did the Sunrise program, another program which is all about, bonding with your child and finding everyday opportunities for learning. And during COVID, so we were all in lockdown. It was like the perfect time for us to learn from each other. And now Suleiman and I, we just like to hang out without this expectation that, say this, use your words for this, use your sentence. It's not a therapy moment. We're just together and we're just talking or not talking. That's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've talked about some of the practices you've used with your own son. What advice would you offer parents just beginning their journey with autism? Because actually, something you've said there's no magic wand,
Yeah.
there's no fix it, there's no real solution. And this is something we've heard from a lot of parents here at Enara as well. What would be the advice you'd offer?
I'm an autism family coach. So when parents come to me with that question, that overwhelm, there is a lot of information out there. There are a lot of solutions, and a lot of them do work. But one would think that with all the answers out there, a mother can easily navigate this journey of autism. But the truth of, the matter is that the overwhelm is not allowing mothers to show up for their children. And so I would say that when you get that diagnosis, get help for yourself first, because the emotional roller
Interesting.
coaster ride that you're going to be embarking on, nobody prepares you for that. The first thing they tell you, okay, your child needs these many therapies, these many times a week, and all you're looking at is, oh my God, you're mentally just doing the math on this, at how expensive this is. You're not thinking about
Right.
yourself. You're not thinking about the toll this is taking on you. So I would say get help for yourself. Take care of yourself first, because this is a long haul journey. It's not like something you're going to fix in 2 years or 3 years. It's going to be there for a while, and it's going to be a difficult one at that. Work on developing a relationship, a bond with your child first.
Right.
Be a parent to that child first. Yes, the label exists, it's there, but he's a boy or a girl first. He's your son or your daughter first, then comes the label. So don't look at everything through the label, which is a mistake I did, even though I knew that that is not the way to do it. And I regret that, but I learned a lot. I wouldn't have had it any other way.
When you talk about help for yourself, and you've also touched upon the fact that it can be quite expensive,
Yeah.
and sometimes we know mothers can be quite self-sacrificing.
Yeah.
What does help look like? What would be some of the things that a mother could do or take steps that doesn't make her feel like she's taking up more space, which is
Yeah.
something commonly felt amongst mothers?
First of all, that could be something as simple as taking an hour or two for yourself during the day. I know
Right.
it sounds simple, but mothers aren't doing it. They're not doing enough of it. And a lot of mothers feel guilty to ask for help. And
Mm.
ask for help can be even from family,
Hmm.
or from a friend, or from a community, a support group, anything. But go out and get that help in whatever way you're comfortable with. Um, most of the mothers that I work with, eventually, right at the end of the first session, it turns out that there are other challenges in the family, which are, actually coming up and not
Yeah.
allowing her to be there for her child. And a lot of negative thoughts, a lot of negative thoughts, a lot of limiting beliefs, all of which they're projecting on their child. Things that have happened in their childhood and, that have shaped their reality. And that is what they're projecting on their child.
What are some maybe tips that you could give? Like if you had to give like really small, quick ones. I mean, sometimes it's really hard to find that extra hour in the day
Yeah.
as a mother,
Yeah.
let alone a mother of a child who is on the spectrum or
Yeah.
neurodiverse.
Yeah.
So if you were to offer some advice, what would be like the small things perhaps that mothers could implement?
For, for self care,
Yes.
it can be something as simple as journaling.
Okay.
It's extremely empowering. When I ask mothers to do simple, like 10 minutes in the day, at night before sleeping, do some journaling, do some breath work, the immense relief, liberation that they feel, they'll actually call me the next day and they're like, we feel clear headed, we feel calmer just by doing a proper breath work and, just putting down whatever's on our mind, because they're thinking of so many things. They're like 20 things going on in their head. And that's why they don't have the headspace to carry on with their day. So I'm like, just write it down. I'm not asking you to do anything else. Just write down whatever's in your head, empty it.
It's a good tip.
That's it. Even something as simple, and that I think every mom can do. Just
Right.
empty your head at the end of the day or in the middle of the day.
I think it could help a lot of people, let alone
Yes,
just
yes.
mothers. But let's move further along on that same journey. How do you train parents to be effective advocates for their children when it comes to therapy?
That's a very sensitive topic as well, because there are a lot of children out there who are verbal, who can actually misuse um, their label, their diagnosis as well. And I think it's very important for parents to just make it very simple for the child to understand that wherever you're going, whether it's a school, it can be anywhere. Self advocacy is very important, and that is something parents should teach children. Whether neurotypical, neurodiverse, self advocacy skills, I think, are very important. I teach my children that anytime they feel unsafe in the class, And it could be over something really small, and it dysregulates you. And you feel unsafe. Stand up for yourself and ask for help. Whether it's a counselor or anyone, you should feel free to get up and say, "I need to speak to someone." And I think that, I mean, if you're asking me that how we can teach kids, I think that is something very important. And I'm trying to do that with Suleiman as well, because he's got limited speech,
Right.
but he has learned to say, "I need help."
That's great.
And yeah, so he doesn't want to say it. At home, I'll have these moments where I know he'll want help, but he's going to like grudgingly, try to do things to help himself. And I'll have to prompt him, like, ask for help. It's okay. Ask
Yeah.
for help. And he's now learning to go, "I need help." It'll come out of his mouth. So I think we should teach children, because we were not taught to do that.
Yes.
So let's be honest, our generation was not taught to ask for
It's
help.
true. And it's also not very culturally relevant as well, right?
Exactly. It's a stigma, right? To ask for help. So moving forward, that is something like, a chain I want to break. And I want to teach my children that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to need help.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
I mean, moving on, let's talk about some of the common misconceptions about autism that you've encountered. Could you give us some examples and how you've addressed them?
A lot of people think that autism means that you have to look a certain way to be autistic.
Yes.
And I'm sure you must have heard that a lot, right? Like, "Oh, you don't look autistic." You don't know how much masking that individual has done to not look autistic, to be able to fit in.
And just to interject, when you say masking, could you elaborate a little bit?
Masking is when they're feeling dysregulated,
Mhm.
which a lot of individuals on the spectrum have sensory processing issues. So the temperature, the light can be very dysregulating, but they mask it by, like, totally numbing themselves from that sensation. And that's very exhausting. That's extremely exhausting. And a lot of children, they mask it in school, and then they come home and they're all out in front of their moms. They're difficult children because they've had to mask it during school hours. So
Yeah.
they come home and they're like completely all over the place. And it's very difficult for mothers to then manage children's meltdowns. And that's what it is. They're having meltdowns over the smallest things. But it's because they're exhausted from this whole masking that's going on. So in school or anywhere else, this misconception is that autism looks a certain way. And if you're verbal, that means all's good. Just because a person on the spectrum talks does not mean. There was a very interesting point that came to my mind, and it's gone now. They have challenges with emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
They're not able to read the room. They're not able to, when I say read the room, they don't understand the social etiquette of what to say, what not to say. It's quite common with people on the autistic spectrum, because that is the main challenge. That is what autism is, right? Social engagement is a challenge.
Right.
So just because they're verbal, just because they're talk, does not mean that they don't have those challenges. And that's this misconception that people assume, "Oh, he's verbal, he doesn't look autistic, therefore he should be okay, with everything that's going on around them." And another one is to assume that all children on the spectrum need to go through some behavior therapy.
Mm.
I know moms who've put their kids through behavior, I don't want to mention those therapies, but they've put their kids through behavioral therapy. And I'd ask them that if your child was not exhibiting these problems, behavioral challenges, why did you do that? Like, because that was all I was told.
Right.
With the diagnosis, the prescription was that you need to do these therapies. And I didn't, ask. I didn't think it through. I just put him in all those therapies when
Because
he
there
didn't
is
need
a
it.
heavy focus on behavior, right? We've just talked about conformity,
Yes.
fitting into like society. I wanted to move on to another topic, which is what strategies do you use to help parents deal with feelings of helplessness during their journey? We talk about masking. This is a whole other way when it comes to
Yeah.
parents, because they also have to behave in a certain way, right?
Yeah.
So what are some of the things you do when you're working with families?
I honestly feel that the whole depression, anxiety comes from parents insisting on wanting to fit in,
Mm.
whatever that is. If my neighbor or my family's the children, other children, if they're doing this, my child should also be doing this.
Right.
And there is this, that's why there's this instant need that, by the age of 2, by the age of 3, they should be doing all these therapies so that they can fit in and do
Mhm.
age appropriate things. And I think that pressure is what adds to the whole helplessness thing.
Mhm.
Because, we fail to appreciate the child's own pace of learning, which is unique. It's different. And I don't agree that there has to be this age that, your child by this age should be able to do this, should be able to do this. And I think that's where a lot of this anxiety, depression come from, that when your child does not achieve that milestone at the age he's supposed to, you go into this whole state of helplessness. Now, when that happens, I would invite parents to slow down, basically take a
Right.
break, because that helped me a lot. My child was in mainstream school and I was struggling to keep up. It was difficult. The school had its own expectations, obviously. And this is, my son is now 17 years, going to be 17 years old. So this is like, quite way back when inclusion was not a thing. But even then, the school was doing everything they could to make sure that, they're on board with this whole
Right.
inclusion thing. And he was the first one of his kind to be in the school. So it was a new experience for the school, but it was very draining for me. Very draining, because I had to spoon feed. I had to do every little thing. And I was like, oh my God, the mental toll this is taking on me. I'm not available for, like I mentioned, right? I couldn't be available for my child in any other way, because I'm like, you have to, keep up. So what I did, and I'm speaking from my own experience, is that I learned to slow down. I was like, okay, I'll pull him out of school for now.
Mhm.
I'll work on him at his pace, at my pace, at a pace that is comfortable for me and that sits well with me. Because if this is burning me out, it doesn't matter, I mean, it's going to come out on the
Right.
child. And I think that was the best decision I made. So now when I coach moms, solutions have to be sustainable. The whole helplessness, depression, anxiety comes when you feel that you're forced to do something you're not comfortable with or your child is not comfortable with. So I would say slow down, take the steps you need to take to slow down. And that's the way forward, I would imagine, for family. And that can look different for everyone. What slow
Yep.
down could mean for anyone's different.
So, touching upon the fact that you mentioned schools, what do you think they can do to adopt a mindset of inclusion?
I think are schools are doing a lot, and it's still very new. This whole concept of inclusion is
Mhm.
still very new. And
Yeah.
I know that schools are coming from a place that they want to be all out there and do as much as they can, but the understanding is still very low. Teachers still feel that we have to work around that diagnosis. Yes, the diagnosis is there, but it looks different for every child. Every child on the spectrum is not the same.
Yes.
Their challenges are vastly different. And unfortunately, teachers don't have that kind of information. So they feel that, oh, he's autistic, therefore, these are automatically the accommodations he needs. He probably doesn't. But, we've already boxed him into this label. And what happens, unfortunately, is that his peers start looking at him just through the lens of that label, of that diagnosis. So if he has ADHD or autism, that's all they look at him as.
Right.
And with that, the child who has that diagnosis or that label, he starts believing that, oh, I can't do this because I have this.
Of course.
It's unfortunately reinforced, because when the child is treated differently, automatically everyone can see it, including the child, that I'm different, maybe lesser, and he's
It
singled out.
exactly. It just
Yeah,
breeds this limiting belief, right? And it doesn't allow you to move past this box
yeah,
that you've been put in.
yeah,
It's something that we were talking about
yeah.
earlier as well. Moving on, I would love to hear your perspective on how you see technology impacting and evolving to support children with special needs, even today as well as the future.
Just the other day, I was working with my son, and my son who's on the spectrum, and I was teaching him how to work with passages. Like he still struggles with comprehension.
Mm-hmm.
So we were using the AI, the image generator. So he was reading the passage
Mm-hmm.
and the images were being formed. So I'm like, okay, now look at the image and answer the questions, because it was difficult for him to visualize. So I used technology there. I used technology to make lesson plans for him. So that, for me, I feel like if something as simple as WhatsApp, you don't have to pick up the phone and call. Especially individuals who are on the spectrum, they're not able to have these conversations over the phone, right? So WhatsApp, I believe, was invented for them, and then everybody's using it.
Right.
Elevators, escalators, all of this came for people, who needed it really, right?
Yes.
Now everybody gets to benefit from it.
It's true.
Yeah, speech to text, text to speech for dyslexic,
Yeah.
people who have dyslexia. So I strongly feel that technology is something that, unfortunately, and this is an observation I've made, a lot of moms who work with their children on the spectrum, their children don't have the fine motor skills, the gross motor skills needed to write.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have the core strength to sit up and write. So I'm like, use technology, type, teach your child to type, teach your child to use a calculator. If they're not able to, add or subtract, if it's not happening for whatever reason, don't frustrate the child. Let the child use a calculator. And I remember back when I was in school, this was 5th grade, and when we were like, why can't we just use a calculator? And the teacher, I remember, told us that you're not going to have a calculator with you all the time. And this is back in those days. Can you imagine?
Little did they know.
Exactly. So I'm like, technology is moving at a pace where education is struggling to keep up. I'm like, go for it. Use it for instead of making your child write pages and pages, because that's what everybody else is doing.
Right.
Let him use AI. Let him use technology to, do other bigger things than, limiting him to just, you can't write yet, therefore this is where we're stuck at.
Yeah, times keep changing and they move so fast. So
Yeah.
many of the things we grew up with that were like acceptable or normal are redundant now.
Exactly.
So it's great to keep children focused on the new technological developments around.
My biggest, this is something that I keep asking, like, who decides in school these textbooks that we have? It's just a question, just a thought that comes to my mind that, you have textbooks for history, for geography, for all of that. And you're like, there's so much information out there. Why aren't we teaching children to go and get information rather than spoon feeding them? So now you're raising a generation where, and this is us as well, right? Where we're expecting people to spoon feed us information,
right,
rather than teaching them to go out and look for that information, whatever you're looking for.
And you learn things along the way when you're doing that.
Everyone then comes with some extra information and you share that information. You talk about that information. It's an interesting exchange of, information. Yeah. So
what message would you like to leave with our listeners, especially those working in special education as well as parents?
The main message that I'd like caretakers, educators, or anyone who's working around people with special needs is respect. Respect can look very different for different people, for an educator, for a parent. A lot of times we feel that we can say things in front of the individual who's on the spectrum, and we say it very carelessly that it's a joke, but it's not, because their everyday challenges are very different and something you would never understand. So respect is something that I learned as a special educator to give the 5 and 4-year-olds that I used to teach. Because if the child is acting up in your class, chances are that he doesn't feel respected. Yeah. So it works both ways. You give respect, you will get respect back. In some form or the other, they will give it back to you. So
that's some very good advice. Yeah. Thank you so much, Farah. Thank you for coming in today and sharing with us your words of wisdom. We've really enjoyed having you on the show.
Thank you for having me, Sophia.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning into Enara Talks. If you found Farah's story inspiring, please share this episode to help raise awareness about autism and the importance of inclusion. Until next time, take care.